Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Tema One, for inviting me here for giving this talk. I was supposed to be here last year too. They had graciously invited me, but due to some reasons, I had to cancel at the last moment. I was hoping that Jakob would give us make us do some exercises before the thing, but so that I could wake up at least, if not the audience. But okay. Okay. So I would like to share a few experiences about what we have been doing in product carbon footprinting in Thailand, with the perspective of, I wouldn't like to call us a developing country as such, but at least an exporting nation. Life cycle assessment has been around in Thailand for about 10 to 15 years. So we are not new to that. And in that sense, global warming potential, which is one of the impact categories in life cycle assessments, has been with us for quite some time too. But as we know it in the current form, product carbon footprinting, this has been with us. We have started initiatives on that since 2008. That's about three and a half years ago, actually. So this was started with, first with, we had this project financed partly by the European Commission, actually, in which we did carbon footprinting of 3 products: steam oven diced chicken, tuna. Two are chicken products and one is a tuna product. These companies applied with us and they wanted to be part of the pilot project. And for these 3 products, we used PAS 2050 for the calculations, because at that time in 2008, that was the only methodology that was actually available to us. So that's what we used. And in fact, at that time, to see what initiatives were going on in Europe, we visited Carbon Trust in the UK, and we visited ADEME in France, and also Tema One and Eco Institute in Berlin that year to learn about their experiences with the PCF pilot project. And we learned quite a few things. Along with that, we also had another project which was internally financed by the Thailand Research Fund on rice, jasmine rice and rice noodles. So all these projects were the pioneering projects before we actually embarked on building the national carbon footprinting guidelines, product carbon footprinting guidelines. And the initiative on the national guidelines for product carbon footprinting is being coordinated by the TGO, which is the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization. And for them, we also built a personal carbon footprint calculator, because the TGO would like to promote the idea that people should try to reduce their carbon footprint, their personal carbon footprint. So this is there on their website. You can see this kind of personal carbon footprint calculator. And there are also, so people can put in their personal data and find out what is their carbon footprint. And also there are suggestions how to reduce their personal carbon footprint. So these were the initiating projects. But then in early 2009, the national effort started for building up the guidelines for carbon footprints. And the responsible organizations were actually, TGO, the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, and the National Metal and Materials Technology Center, MTech, which is under the Ministry of Science and Technology. And they collected the very few experts that we had in life cycle assessment. So we managed to get about 15 members from academia, from research organizations, from the industrial organizations, etc., who are well versed in not carbon footprinting, but in life cycle assessments. We got together and we studied several of the at that time existing methodologies. Of course, ISO 14040 and 44, because it's a life cycle assessment. And we also looked at the PAS 2050. The 14067 initiative came a bit later, at least the documents were released later. So even now it's of course in the draft version, but we keep following it anyway because we would like the national standard to be aligned with the with the ISO 14067. And of course there were the Japanese technical specifications that had also been developed at that time, and Japan was quite a helpful partner to promote as well as to share their experiences and help us to build the national guidelines. So during the process of building the national guidelines, we also studied, we had these pilot projects. So there were 24 pilot projects that joined us because we would like to test the methodology, ongoing methodology development. We'd like to test it with some products to see what kind of difficulties we have or something like this so that we can tailor the guidelines to fit the Thai context. So we have many companies, I think a lot of these companies, they are very, very famous in Thailand, but maybe internationally you might know only a few of them. For example, the Thai Airways, you would know that. And I'm not sure if you know the other companies, but okay. These were the 24 companies that joined us. And then we came up with the national guidelines that were officially launched along with the label of the products on the 25th of December 2009. I mentioned this date simply because it was Christmas Day, so we remember, at least for me, I remember it even now. So these guidelines, okay, they are in Thai right now, but we also did a translation into English recently, and hopefully it should be available very soon on the website of TGO. So if you look at the website of TGO, that is www.tgo.or.th. So if you look at that, you can get these guidelines in English too. Actually, the two of us did the translation very recently, about a month or so ago. So the green book is the national guidelines, and the blue book tells the details of how to apply for the carbon label, Thai carbon label. So because the Thai carbon label was also launched at the same time. And the rationale was, okay, like many other labels, the rationale was we want to disseminate information, create awareness about carbon or greenhouse gas emissions to the public in general. Because Thailand is actually a non-Annex 1 country, so we don't really have obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But anyway, we are a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol, and there are many efforts going on in Thailand for inventorying as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For example, efforts on energy efficiency, CDM projects, and so on. Okay, so this carbon footprint label was also maybe a small contributor, or hopefully a small contributor in that. And to motivate producers to have more environmentally friendly products. Actually not environmentally friendly, but okay, more less greenhouse gas emitting products, so to speak. And to enhance the competitiveness of Thai products in the international market. This is because a lot of the products from Thailand are exported to Europe, to USA, to Japan. So it was kind of, since these carbon labels were coming up in other countries. For example, the UK had launched, the Carbon Trust had launched the carbon label, and Japan had a carbon label, and France was threatening to have a mandatory standard at that point of time. So, no, sorry, I'm only kidding about the threatening part. But yeah, so, I mean, the producers in Thailand who were exporting to these nations were getting a bit concerned, and they would like to be prepared. So this is what the Thai carbon label looks like. You see the earth with the CO2, and this is this is Thailand, the map of Thailand, and we have 3 significant digits. And this is an example of one of the products that was one of the first products to have the Thai carbon label. And okay, this just says that it helps to reduce create awareness about carbon footprinting and about global warming, actually. So then these are just examples of many of the products that were labeled by the Thai carbon label. And there are, I think, more than 100 products right now having the Thai carbon label. So it's coming from many sectors. Largely it's the food sector, you might have noticed, but there are others also like ceramic tiles, textiles, rubber tires, cans, and so on. So what some of the issues that we faced when we were doing these exercises and what we realized, I think some of this is common to what you might have heard in the morning, especially from Katarina's presentation, because we also faced that. One was about the data collection, because we don't have yet, I mean, we are building the national lifecycle inventory database, but we don't have it ready yet. So we had to collect a lot of data at the primary level. And we have a lot of, for the agriculture sector especially, we have a lot of smallholders, and their practices are quite different. So how to collect a representative sample when you have hundreds of farms, or even in some cases for shrimp, for example, thousands of farms. So how to collect a sample? And what do we mean by representative? Since none of the guidelines really specified. In the national inventory, we are talking about if something is representative at the national level, if we have more than 60% coverage. So here we started with more than 50% coverage, but that itself seemed to be too big for us to handle. Or use the square root, this square root thing we got from the past guidelines to past 2050. But there are no particular rules, so we were quite concerned how to convince the companies to collect that much data, because it's very difficult. And then a lot of the, we're in very short of time, it seems. Okay, I thought I had 15 minutes, but maybe not. I did. Okay, I talked too much. So that happens. I'm used to talking too much. So, okay, then there is a lot of the things are bought from the open market. So people buy from the auction market. So you do not know how to trace back where the material exactly comes from. It's very, very difficult. And this is one of the problems we faced when we had to trace back the upstream of the supply chains. Some companies, on the other hand, are vertically integrated. They're very big companies, and they have very good data recording system, and they own the supply chain, so to speak. So they had very good data. And they were complaining that how come we have such good data, but others will use secondary data, for example. So they felt that this was unfair for them. Or we had problems with, they said, what if we have the accurate data, but it is higher than the secondary data? What happens to us? Something like that. So, and even within the secondary data, which database to use? There are several databases available. So these kind of problems we faced during collecting data. Product category rules. Defining the product was very difficult also, because for many of the processed food products, there were hundreds and sometimes even thousands of stock keeping units with minor variations, slight difference in spices, etc. And how do we define a product? This was quite difficult for us. And then dissemination of information. When we release such a number, because the Thai carbon label, as you saw, has a number to it, what does it mean to the consumer? How will they react to it? And then how to specify things. So we said, okay, if we develop product category rules, we started with 3. Right now we have product category rules at the national level for chicken, rice, and textiles. But if we have thousands and thousands of products, how do we prioritize? So this was a big issue. And then if we develop our own product category rules, will they be internationally accepted? This is, of course, a situation for us. And then what will the consumers understand? So a lot of the companies with whom we did these pilot studies, they felt like the numbering system was not maybe a good thing so much, because, I mean, is 105 really different from 100? So this is always a problem. So they would, in fact, prefer a scaled one. At least some of the companies mentioned. Because, I mean, we talk about there are methodological choices, and things may differ based on the methodological choices, etc. And, okay, all the standards say we have to put all the details of the methodological choices, etc. on the website. But who is going to visit the website and read it? And how many will actually understand it? So I mean, it's nice to put it in a standard and say that we have to put all these things there, all the details there. But I don't think consumers will actually go At least not, we don't expect in Thailand that consumers will go to the website and read all the LCA reports or carbon footprint reports of every product over there. And one thing was land use change. This has been an issue with us because, okay, we are using the tier 1 method of the IPCC, which is quite broad. And especially since we started with past 2050, we were very worried because for a lot of the farms, etc., we did not know what was happening in 1990 or something like this. We could not trace back that far. And we felt that it was a bit unfair to use 1990 as a baseline year, because in 1990, we didn't even know what are the effects of land use change on climate change. And why should we use that year? So we felt like maybe 2008 or 2010 even could be a better, more relevant baseline year, especially since the ISO 14067 was supposed to come out in 2011 initially, but now I think it's in 2012. And the other thing was carbon storage in perennial plants. Because, for example, the oil palm, when we visited the oil palm sector, they felt like, okay, you want to penalize us by using data from Malaysia because we don't have our own data. So you use the worst-in-class data and you penalize us for land use change. But you don't want to consider the carbon that is stored in the palm, which has a life of 25 or 30 years. So stuff like this, these kind of questions we faced from the companies, and I think these are relevant if we have to address these issues at the international level and have come up with a harmonized international standard, which is probably what we are all looking towards. And the other thing was, okay, it's very expensive exercise. Okay, many of these products we did the carbon footprint because they were subsidized by either the projects or at the national level because it was a national. But once the national pilot project period is over, then who finances? Consultants. We have very few consultants, so we are very hard pressed for time. We arranged many training courses to build up more consultants so that they could do, because the demand really increased for carbon footprinting after the label was announced. So these kind of things were there, and then people wanted to have some easy to use tools. So right now, in fact, we are building up, we have just started to look at building up a tool, what we are calling the food print. It's a carbon footprint calculation tool for food products or agricultural products. So unfortunately, we haven't prepared the brochure on time. So, but we will have the website ready soon so that you can have all the information about this particular thing. So we would like to make this tool to help companies, especially smaller companies who cannot really afford to go and collect lots of data and have do the carbon footprint calculations by themselves, to facilitate so that they can also do the calculations, not necessarily for a label, but at least to do calculations so they can think about how to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. I think I've taken more time than was allocated to me, but if there are questions, I'm